what I'm getting ready to share with you is actually not a podcast. In fact, what I'm getting ready to share with you is actually not even a free piece of content, okay? Courtney, she's a life coach, she's a business coach. Like, what is it that you are coaching people on? What exactly is your methodology? You're about to learn what that is right now. Hey, Courtney Sanders here. Welcome back to my podcast episode. If you are listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, you can always come on over to my YouTube channel if you want to see the visuals, see my crazy facial expressions. But I'm really excited about today's podcast episode because what I'm getting ready to share with you is actually not a podcast. In fact, what I'm getting ready to share with you is actually not even a free piece of content, okay? This is one of the videos that I have taken from my coaching certification program. Yes, it is here. You have heard me talk a lot about it. I have talked about over the last few months, I have gotten my own coaching certification, gone through my own coach training, and I have my flagship program, the Next Big Name Bootcamp, and we have added all of these coaching components to it so that now, not only do we teach you how to build a wildly successful coaching business, but we will teach you how to coach and we will give you a coaching certification on top of that. So if that is something that you are interested in, you can click the link below if you're watching this video, or in the description box or show notes or wherever. If you're listening to it, wherever you're listening to it, check the description box, wherever it is, in order to get the link to apply. We are now enrolling for our new cohort, and I'm just so excited to be a coaching certification provider. I mean, yeah, we not only teach you how to build a coaching business, we teach you how to become a certified coach, and we give you a certification to boot. So with that, let me go ahead and let you see one of the videos. And the reason that I've taken one of the videos and decided to go ahead and make this public for both my YouTube channel and my podcast is because it really explains my coaching methodology. So one thing that really sets my coaching certification apart is that we not only, again, will give you an accredited coaching certification. I didn't mention that. Yes, our coaching certification is accredited, by the way, because not every coaching certification is, but you will not only get an accredited coaching certification, but we will teach you how to come up with your own coaching methodology. That is huge. I actually don't have time to go over it in this video because the clip that I'm going to share with you is long enough, but we talk a lot about in other videos. And again, if you click the link in the description box, I explain how all of this works, what we do in the coaching certification program, and what you are going to learn. But I talk specifically about how important it is that you come up with your own coaching methodology. That is the one thing that I find that so many, not just coaches, but online experts, consultants, anyone who's billing themselves as some sort of like information, knowledge worker online, they're like, oh, it's so crowded. So many people are online calling themselves a coach. It's not that it's so crowded, it's that there's so many people saying the same things, right? And so if you don't have anything that differentiates you, and you don't have a unique framework, a unique way of creating the transformation that you create, it's going to be difficult to, get anybody to pay attention, let alone actually attract clients. And so in this video that you are getting ready to watch, which again is pulled from the coaching certification, I am introducing not only the concept of coming up with your own methodology, but I am introducing my methodology. So I decided to name this podcast essentially my coaching methodology, how I coach myself to success, because in this video, I explain what my coaching methodology is and how I came up with it, and how it's really rooted from who I am as a person, what my core beliefs and core values are, and what I have seen work not only in my life, but in the lives of the clients that I have coached. So if you've ever been, curious, well, Courtney, she's a life coach, she's a business coach. Like, what is it that you are coaching people on? Like, yes, you can help people grow their business. Yes, you can help coaches, be better coaches. But like, what exactly are you teaching? What exactly is your methodology? You're about to learn what that is right now. So over the course of this certification program, we're going to be talking a lot about your coaching methodology and how you create transformation for your clients, but also how you can dive into your uniqueness and really create a methodology that is unique to you. And so I could not teach that, and I would be a complete hypocrite if I taught that if I didn't have my own methodology. And so I know you might be wondering, well, Courtney, you talk all about methodology and how important it is. What exactly is your methodology? What is the methodology that you use to coach your clients and create transformation? And I'm really excited to share this methodology, not just because this is a methodology that I developed very early on in my career when I first got my start as a life coach, and I was primarily focused on helping clients just achieve general goals and, generally do better in their lives, right? That was before I learned to kind of niche down and be more specific, which are also topics that we'll talk about later on in this program after you have mastered this coaching methodology and developed your own. But I really love this methodology because it has served me over the entire course of my career. So yes, it's something that I developed early on in my career, but it is something that I have used and continue to use to this day, even as I coach clients in the area of business, and even now where I stand as I am expanding into coaching corporate clients, to coaching employees and corporations, and even doing economic empowerment work in developing nations all over the world. This is the same model that I come back to. So I tell you this not just because it's something that I developed, but it's something that has served me as I have pivoted and navigated in different areas of my coaching career. And so I just want you to keep this in mind as you develop your own methodology later on. This is going to be something that is specific enough to get transformation, but broad enough to get transformation in a variety of different contexts and with a variety of different clients. And so my methodology is something that I developed, again, very early on. It's very much rooted into my story, my history, just my values, things that are important to me, and of course the methodology that I first and foremost put myself through when I was creating my own life transformation all those years ago. And so the methodology that I base all of my coaching on is something that I call the RISE methodology. And so it is an acronym, and again, it's something that I truly believe in, right? So it's not just something that I pulled out of out of the sky or just kind of made up. This is something that I not only believe in, it is something that I have personally used to transform my own life. And again, this is something that I have used to transform the lives of my clients in a variety of contexts. Yes, in life coaching, but also later in business coaching, and even now working with organizations and broad organizational, governmental coaching to achieve all of these big goals. I still come back to this methodology. And so the R in RISE stands for radical responsibility. That is the first item that I not only had to take myself through, but I find is really, really important to take clients through. And so again, I know that a lot of this can sound very philosophical and esoteric, because in many respects, you're going to be learning this model, right? You're going to be learning the RISE model and how you can use the RISE model for your own clients, but you're also going to be learning how I came up with the RISE model, again, based on my own life experience, and how you can come up with your own methodology in conjunction with the RISE model, should you choose to create transformation for your clients. But I think we can all agree in the coaching industry that radical responsibility is the first and foremost mindset shift that is very important that you take your clients through, because it really lays the groundwork for transformation to happen. So many of you might know that my coaching story completely started on accident. I had a full ride engineering scholarship at Howard University. Shout out to all my fellow Howard Bison, including our Vice President Kamala Harris here in the United States, for those of you who are international. But yeah, I had a full ride engineering scholarship to Howard University, and I lost it because I was focusing on starting a business, right? So, I was in chemical engineering, but I was cutting class, trying to start this fledgling hair care business at the time. Yes, my first foray into entrepreneurship was in the arena of hair care. And because I was in my early 20s and I had no business experience and no business coaching, I had no idea what I was doing. It's not surprising that not only did the business fail, but my grades failed shortly thereafter. And I got a letter in the mail that was like, hey, your scholarship is revoked. If you want to stay enrolled in school, you're going to have to pay up and figure something out. And so that really kicked me off on this journey into coaching on accident, because I got introduced to a life coach kind of incidentally. I was selected before my grades tanked somehow. I got selected for this women's entrepreneurship program that was happening over the summer. And the program took, I think, 30 different women who were students and interested in entrepreneurship, and they rolled out the red carpet for us. We had a lot of interaction with large corporate sponsors, Home Depot, Pepsi, et cetera, who were really, sewing into the next generation of entrepreneurs at that time. And I had a life coach on staff. And so this life coach had us do an exercise where essentially we had to write a letter to ourselves, and she said that she was going to mail it to us in 12 months. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was one of the only students in that cohort that took it seriously. And so I went home and I just dove headfirst into personal development. So even as I was attending this program, I knew my grades were on the rocks. I can't remember if my scholarship had been revoked, or I knew it was on the verge of being revoked because I knew I'd spent all semester starting a business and not being in class. So even though I got selected to go to this program, I was like very nervous, about the bill becoming due when I got home and, seeing what my final transcripts were. So I wrote a letter saying that I was going to, turn this all around in school. And I took radical responsibility at that time where I didn't know how I was going to get myself out of that situation, but I did what I could do in that moment. And I didn't have a lot of money, but all I knew to do was read personal development books. So I remember sitting on the floor of bookstores because I couldn't afford to buy the books. And I would just read all of the greats, right? Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Stephen Covey, every personal development author you could think of. I just would read everything that they say that you needed to do in order to turn your life around. And as an exercise in accountability and commitment, I started a blog, not because I wanted it to be a business and not because I thought that I was going to start a life coaching brand, even though it eventually turned into that, but because I just needed someone to hold me accountable. And so I figured if I had strangers reading this blog where I was documenting my adventures and learning these personal development principles and then applying it to my life, that would force me to actually do what I said I was going to do. Because again, I was very nervous about receiving that letter from the life coach 12 months from that point and having not achieved any of the goals that I wrote down in that session. And so the blog was really just a function to kind of hold me to my word, but it ended up becoming this thing that eventually grew into what is my life coaching business today. In fact, the organization that brought all the female students out for entrepreneurship invited me back a second time to be a student leader because they were so impressed with how I was documenting my journey on this blog. And then they invited me to bid on an RFP, so a request for proposals. I had to Google it at that time because I didn't even know what that was. I had to rush and file my business registration, file my LLC here in the States, and just to be eligible in order to submit that bid. And I couldn't believe that they invited me to bid on a multi-5-figure RFP based on learning self-development and personal development principles. And they were essentially saying, do you want to come back and train the other students? And so that was kind of my first taste that someone would pay for this. And that was really my foray into life coaching. But I never would have gotten there had I not taken radical responsibility for the results that I was presently getting in my life. And so again, my model is based on my own story, my own personal experience, what I've put myself through, but it's also based on my belief because of what I've personally been through. And even as I've coached other clients, even as I've seen, family members, friends, people that I'm not necessarily coaching, but I'm watching from afar, I find that first and foremost, people often do not get the results that they want in life because they do not take radical responsibility for those results. And this can be a very tricky thing because I recognize that oftentimes we, ourselves, but also our clients, people we see in the world, go through things that are technically no fault of their own. However, radical responsibility is not about accepting fault, but it's about accepting the ability to respond, right? That is what responsibility is all about. And so for me, this is the basis of my coaching because I need to get the client to a place where they first and foremost are taking radical responsibility for the results that we are going to endeavor to work on together. And so again, this is something that I am very passionate about, especially when I think about my history and the history of my people as an African American. Here in the United States, there are continuous conversations around diversity and police brutality and economic justice and reparations and all the things to really pour back into African Americans based on so much of what was taken from us for hundreds of years, the slave trade and all these different things. And so I think it's very easy, I myself, again, given my history and my background, I could be someone who raises my hand and say, look at all these things that I have to face. Look at all this oppression that, my ancestors have gone through and oppression that, my grandmother and my parents and even I to this day may still have to face. That's not my fault, right? How can I take responsibility for that? That's not my fault. And again, that's not what I'm saying. thing. It is not my fault, right? It's not my fault that any of these things happen, but I do have the ability to respond. And not only do I have the ability to respond, I have the ability to respond in a way that benefits me. Yes, it doesn't matter what you are going through, what you are dealing with that may not be your fault. You, right? So you as you, but then also you as a coach and your clients always have the ability to respond in a manner that ultimately benefits you and ultimately points you closer to the direction that you are ultimately looking to go, even if you don't know what that is, right? So again, back when, my situation, losing my college scholarship, trying to figure out how to get my grades back up, continue my education, ultimately become an entrepreneur and all of these different things, I didn't know half the things. I didn't know a quarter of the things that I know now, but I still responded, right? I owned my ability. I call this choosing your choice. I owned my ability to respond in a way that ultimately benefit me and launch me in the direction that would get me closer to where I was ultimately looking to go. And at the time, it was sitting on the floor of Barnes & Noble's bookstore and reading books that I couldn't even afford to buy, but taking the lessons and taking the information and committing to myself that I was going to apply this information. So again, this is deeply rooted in my story. I believe this. I'm not telling you something that I know. I'm telling you something that I've been through. But R in my RISE model and in my RISE methodology is really about taking radical responsibility, right? So again, you're going to learn how to do that with your own clients. You're going to learn how to do that with yourself, but then you can see this almost as a meta model of how you can develop your own methodology. So first, R is radical responsibility, but the next step, which is equally important after you've taken radical responsibility, and that is creating an identity shift. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they endeavor to change, right? It could be something simple like, our annual New Year's goals. We all want to lose 10 pounds, right? Around New Year's and save more money and read more books and, call our grandparents more and, all these typical resolutions that we make. Yet come about February, maybe March, if you're really, really disciplined, oftentimes we fall off that, right? And again, this is something that we have to pay attention to as coaches because our clients are hiring us in order to get results. And I see far too many coaches not take responsibility for their clients' results, right? They say, oh, the client's results are just the client's results. And while that is true, the client's results are ultimately their responsibility. It is your responsibility to structure an environment and to do as much as you can in order to help them get that result, right? So it's a shared responsibility that you share with the client. It's not all on the client and it's not all on you, but it's really for the both of you. And I find that a step that many coaches miss, but also many individuals miss when they are really trying to create change in their lives is they do not shift their identity. Here's the thing, it is much easier to engage in a behavior if that is natural and congruent with your identity. Oftentimes we struggle to do the very things that we want to do, that we say that we're gonna do, that we're gonna tell our family and friends that we're doing, that we commit to the high heavens, right, during New Year's that we are gonna do because we try to do them from our present identity and not the identity of the person for whom that is natural. Can I get an amen, right? Think about this. If you have an identity of being an athlete, right, it is normal and natural for you to, go on a run, for you to sign up for marathons, for you to work out, for you to be mindful of what you're eating because you are an athlete, right? I don't know any professional or serious athlete who doesn't track and monitor and keep journals and write down what they are doing in terms of physical activity, but also what they are eating. However, if your identity is, I'm just Joe Schmo or Jane Doe, I'm just a regular person working a regular job who's just, an average nobody, but, I want to be this ultra healthy person, you are trying to adopt healthy habits from the identity of someone for whom that is not natural and normal. And so I find that when we talk about creating change, creating transformation, a lot of people miss this, and again, this is why it's important in my model. Again, this is something that I personally had to do. We have to ask ourselves, not what is the behavior that we ultimately need to achieve, but what is the identity that we need to step into? What is the identity that we need to shift into, right? Even Clark Kent had to take his glasses off, you know, when he became Superman, right? Because he had to step into a Superman identity, even though he was Superman the entire time. There has to be a mental shift so that the behavior and the activity that we do is natural and normal for the person that we are endeavoring to be. And so many people get this backwards because they believe that they can become the person after they start doing the things, not realizing that it's actually the opposite. You can't do the things until you become the person, but becoming the person is a decision, it's not a circumstance, okay? In fact, it's the opposite, right? Your circumstances will conform to the decision that you make and the identity that you shift into, but you have to choose that identity from the beginning. And again, this is rooted from my own story because I said, oh my goodness, I've done lost my scholarship, right? My parents are not going to pay for me to finish school. This will be so embarrassing. I don't want to go home. I really want to, you know, matriculate, right? I want to graduate. I want to finish my degree. I'm taking radical responsibility, right? I'm learning all these personal development books. I'm reading all this stuff about self-discipline and time management, and I'm serious. Like, I really want to get my grades together, but I had to decide that I was going to be an A student before my transcripts reflected that, right? Imagine if I would have said, I'm not going to go to class, I'm not going to do my homework, and I'm not going to read until my transcripts say 4.0, A+ student, then I'll start engaging in those behaviors because then I'll be an A+ student. That's not what happened. I actually had to shift into the identity of an A+ student before my transcripts reflected it. And in fact, it took a good 6 months to a year, right? 1, 2, maybe even 3 semesters for my transcripts to reflect the identity that I had already shifted into. But I started becoming an A student. Like, I literally became an A student before I had A's on my transcripts, because what is an A student? Is an A student just someone who has all A's? Or is an A student someone who engages in certain behaviors? And so that was an identity that I had to shift to and an identity that I had to commit to. So I started to do the things that an A student would do. I started to adopt the beliefs that an A student would adopt, and it made it that much easier for me to engage in that behavior. Even relatively recently, I have my daughter, my youngest, who, as I am recording this, is about 2.5 years old. But I remember, you know, I've always prided myself in being very active, physically fit. I'm one of those Peloton moms. Yes, I have a Peloton bike. I'm in my office. If you are a Peloton person, you know, send me your screen name and then I'll follow you and we could duke it out on the bike. But I remember after my second child, I was really having a hard time getting back in the saddle, literally, on my bike, and getting back into fitness and, you know, engaging in my normal routine. After I had my son, I kind of, you know, got back into everything pretty easily. But after my daughter, you know, she threw me for a doozy. And so I was asking myself, like, what is different about this time? Why is it so difficult for me to be consistent with my workouts? And I noticed that the self-talk that I had to myself, right, and this is under the broad heading, right, of identity shift. There's a lot of different tools and tactics that we can do, even just within shifting someone's identity. But one of them is self-talk, right? And so I noticed that my own self-talk, I would rationalize and say things like, oh, you know, I deserve not to work out, right? It's not important for me to work out because I am a stressed out, burned out mom. I'm not getting much sleep. You know, we just got her to the place where she's sleeping through the night. For months, I've been up in the middle of the night, you know, nursing my daughter. I am just a frazzled, tired, burned out mom. That's why I can't work out, right? And so it was natural and normal for me to not work out when in the identity of a frazzled and burned out mom. But I had to look at myself and I said, yeah, I'm a frazzled and burned out mom, but I have a team, I have staff, I have a whole social media brand, a whole presence, right? I have, you know, this global brand and this global company that I'm building. I'm also kind of a public figure, right? Sometimes I go out, I get recognized, true story, right? I remember I was traveling to South Africa, and as I'm like checking my bags in, this was for my South African retreat that I hold annually every year, someone recognized me from YouTube. The guy was like, oh, do you need help with your bags? And I'm like, oh, thank you. And he's like, this is a very strange question, but are you on YouTube? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're a coach? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh my goodness, I watch all your videos. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm getting recognized in the check-in line, you know, at the airport. But I'm a public figure. And when I started to really step into my identity, again, because we carry multiple identities at a time, but it's something that we have to be cognizant of shifting into, right? Like Clark Kent, he's not Superman until he takes the glasses off. It is a decision that has to be made, a shift that has to be made. But I said, you know what? I think it'd be easier for me to be consistent with my workouts when I shift into the identity of being a public figure, because I am that, right? And so when I changed my self-talk and I did not allow myself to engage in self-talk that was around the identity of being a haggard, frazzled frazzled mom and was more in line with the identity of being a CEO, of being a business owner, of being a woman entrepreneur, of being a public figure, I found that it was much easier to not only work out, it was easier to be consistent because I wasn't focused on working out perfectly or, working out for a gazillion hours. It was like, even if I could do 10 minutes here in between a meeting and then I'll just spend another 10 minutes, doing sit-ups before bed. Like, I found it easier to plug in my workout time because I thought, what would a public figure do, right? If I was a celebrity and I had a whole, day full of PR and press junkets and I was super busy, I'm pretty sure that a celebrity would still make time for their workouts because they are a public figure. And so I just shifted into that identity, and that made it that much easier. So I is for identity shift. So important to shift. And even within my methodology, again, identity shift, all these things, radical responsibility, identity shift, the other items that we'll talk about in just a moment, they all have their own tools to help you really hone in on that. But beyond just identifying the identity that you need to shift into, there's also a concept that I'll just touch on briefly here, which is identity management. So another thing that people oftentimes miss, or coaches often miss when they are trying to shift their clients into an identity, is that there must be a structure and a routine for managing that identity continuously, right? So we need to work on making sure that our environment reflects the identity that we are shifting into, that our peer group, that our friends, that everything around us, as much as we can control it, reflects the identity and says our identity back to us. Because as we shift into an identity and we go about our day-to-day, it's very easy to shift out of that identity if nothing in our lives says that we are that person and nothing in our lives reflects that, right? So now hear me, because at the beginning I said your identity is not dependent on your circumstances, right? Your identity actually creates your circumstances. But if your circumstances do not reflect your identity back to you, it makes it that much harder to stay into the identity, right? So there's identity shift, but there's also identity management, and there's a whole, framework that I have for that in terms of, coaching my clients. But when we talk broadly about the RISE methodology, again, it's radical responsibility. It's making that identity shift. But then the S in RISE is for self-mastery. So again, this is really rooted in my story, because what do you think your girl was learning when she was sitting on the floor reading all of those books and blogging about all of her personal development experiments? She was learning self-mastery, yes. And so self-mastery is my broad term that I use for things like self-discipline, for self-talk, for time management. It's basically, can you master yourself? And this is so important that coaches know this, because every client is going to be different, and every client has different weaknesses and strengths. And so we actually want to use our strengths. And in this coaching program, we'll talk a lot about strengths-based coaching, strengths-based methodology, because I do believe that it's a lot easier to dive into your strengths and to use your strengths to shore up your weaknesses than it is to spend inordinate amounts of time trying to get your weaknesses to where they are, right? We need to mitigate our weaknesses so that they are not a liability, but we really create change when we're really leaning into our strengths. And so we want to be clear about what our strengths and what our weaknesses are, and then we want to use our strengths in order to master ourselves so that we don't fall into spells of negative thinking or procrastination or just feeling, blah, or not managing our time well. A lot of this is about self-awareness, right? So I'd say the root of self-mastery, and again, I have tools and techniques, and there's a whole framework. When we get into self-mastery, there's a level of self-awareness that you need to have, honesty about the type of person that you are, the type of things that you do, right? I know how I am. I know what can sometimes kind of knock me off my square, what things cause me to get distracted, how I tend to lose my focus. And again, I create an environment and I use my strengths to shore up my weaknesses so that I am staying in the pocket, so to speak, and doing the things that I need to do in order to create the outcomes that I need to create, right? I am self-mastering. So even we talk about this, broad goal that a lot of people have in terms of getting physically fit or getting back in shape. Yes, there's taking radical responsibility. Yes, it's shifting your identity to the type of person for whom, working out would be normal and natural, but it's also this self-mastery piece. What are the practices, the habits that we need to engage in, knowing who we are and knowing what our weaknesses are and really where our vulnerabilities are, and what do we need to do to master ourselves so that we can do the things that we need to do and we can engage in the behaviors of the identity that we have shifted into on a consistent basis, right? So there's radical responsibility, R, there's identity shift, I, there is self-mastery, S, But then there's the E, and this is something that is hugely important. Again, I don't see a lot of coaches talk about it, but if you've been around my brand for any amount of time, you'll see how this is really woven through everything I do because it is so important. And it might sound like it's coming out of left field, but it's not. And that is economic empowerment. Economic empowerment. Economic empowerment is so important because whether you are an employee or you're an entrepreneur, there has to be an awareness of the gifts and the skills that you have, and there has to be knowledge of how to monetize them so that you can create the financial and economic resources you need in order to create the life that you want, right? Regardless of where you live, I know that I serve clients all over the world, whether you are a highly capitalistic society like the United States or not, even in our global economy, it's driven by capital, right? It's driven by money, it's driven by capitalism. And again, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you are an employee, we need to contend with the financial realities that often impact our ability to be our best selves and to fully go after our potential. And so this is something that I had to learn for myself, right? Losing my scholarship and having to come up with the money in order to pay for school, but then still trying to start this business. And then now I had all these living expenses that I didn't have before because I had a scholarship that was covering everything. I lost that. Not only did I have to pay for school, but now I have to pay for rent. And I'm like working 3 jobs. I was like a waitress and an intern. And, I was doing all these different things. I had all these various side hustles. Part of that was because I fell into an economic reality where I needed to learn how to quickly economically empower myself so that I could maintain my living standards and, again, achieve the different things that I want. And this is near and dear to my heart, especially as I do work doing empowerment for women, empowerment for vulnerable women in different communities. Again, as my work grows and branches out outside of the US, but as we touch women globally who sometimes are in, developing economies or in precarious situations, that economic empowerment is so important because you can give somebody the tools all day, but if they don't have what they need, if they don't have the resources to keep the lights on, let alone pursue, self-actualization, right? We think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Even Maslow talks about how, there's a base level of survival that needs to happen before someone can even, pontificate, let alone reach for the higher level or the highest level of their potential. And so as a base really of my work, I think it's so important that people learn and they master personal economic empowerment, but they learn how to economically empower their clients because they might find that they're giving their clients resources and tools and teaching them all the different things that they need to create change. But if finances are not there, and again, not just finances, but I use the term broadly economic empowerment because it might be maybe the finances are there, but they're in a job or a career, a high stress career that is taking them away from their family and is causing, all of this drama in their life. And then you're coaching them on all the different things that they need to do, but they feel trapped because they have all these expenses now and, they're integral into the career that they're working and they feel like they can't get out of it because where else am I going to make this kind of money, right? I mean, I've worked with physicians, right? Doctors who were burned out at the height of the pandemic and they felt like they had to continue in what they were doing because, well, I'm a doctor and I make all this money and, what else can I do? And so again, showing them how to economically empower themselves, really monetizing, packaging their gifts to do whatever it is that they want to do and not be tied to any particular position, right? Really taking ownership. It's almost like a circular model, right? Going back to radical responsibility, but taking radical responsibility for your financial destiny and understanding that it's not tied to a particular job. Again, as we think globally and we think about so many new opportunities that are available through the internet and even coaching, right? Everybody can take their skill set, learn a methodology, and then create change in others. So learning how to create these online businesses, this model really is designed to empower people all over the world, regardless of where they are starting from. So again, that is what I had to do for myself. I had to learn how to take the gifts that I had and the things that I was good at, and I kind of fell into it on accident. This organization was like, hey, you're really good at this personal development stuff. You want to come back and be a student leader, and then you want to, bid on this RFP and, work with the students going forward. And, over time, I've had people come to me and say, hey, can you help me on that? Can you coach me on that? I've watched you do this. And that started my economic empowerment in terms of creating a coaching business and becoming a coach. But I know that everybody's gifts and talents are different, but regardless of what your gifts and talents are, there is a way to monetize it, and there is a way to create financial abundance, to get the economic resources that you need in order to facilitate the change that you are looking for in your life, right? So I have, a whole framework on how I do that, how I coach my clients in doing that. But as you learn my RISE framework, right? So R, radical responsibility, I, identity shift, S, self-mastery, and then E, economic empowerment, you will be able to do that on some level with your clients as well. So hopefully this was helpful and eye-opening around what my methodology is, what is the methodology that you're gonna learn, what is the methodology that I've used to create change in my clients for the near decade that I have been coaching online, but also I hope from a meta level that this was eye-opening to you so that you can think about how you can create your own coaching methodology. And again, in the modules, we'll go into this in depth, but hopefully you can kind of see the root of my story and my experience that really developed all of this work. So with that, I will see you in the next video, and I hope this was helpful. Bye. All right. I hope that was very eye-opening for you. I hope you really enjoyed that, learning a little bit about what is my coaching framework, what is my coaching methodology, and how I create transformation for my clients, and get a little glimpse of how you can do the same. So again, in my coaching certification program, we not only teach you the nuts and bolts of that methodology, but we teach you how to come up with your own methodology that will help you stand out from the crowd, help you get transformations for your clients, and really, help you become, a big name in your niche and in your industry. That's why my program is called the Next Big Name Bootcamp. So, having your own clear-cut methodology is a big part of that. So if you want to learn more, and if you want to even enroll in our upcoming cohort, you can click the link below in order to do that. You will watch a video that explains how all of this works. It's just a short video. And if after that you're like, yes, I totally want to do that, you'll fill out an application, and then you will be able to book a time with one of our enrollment coordinators who will do a demo of our coaching certification and the Next Big Name Bootcamp, and this entire process for you. And if you're down, hopefully you're down, you'll enroll, and I'll get the opportunity to work with you and help you become a certified coach and the next big name in your industry. So again, if you're interested in that, you can click any of the links below this video, or the description box or show notes, wherever you are watching this from. Again, I hope to see you inside of the program, and if not, I will see you in the next video / the next podcast. Bye.